Yes, sir, that's it right there, man. That is the It's Your Perspective poem. Super's been blessing this show from the very, very beginning with that poem. Is going to continue to do it until the very, very end. Our guests tonight are Kiyami. Help me here. Qiyamah Rahman and Junee Hunt. Junee Hunt, I'm sorry. Please forgive me. They're going to be talking about emotional well-being and healthy communities. Welcome to the show.
Welcome, welcome.
Yes, you guys have to hold the mic up. Yes, you have to make sure that switch is up. Make sure that switch is pushed up. Okay.
Thank you for having us.
Right. Thank you for coming in.
So let's talk about emotional well-being and healthy communities. I think in light of what's happening around here in the Virgin Islands, I think we all probably need so emotional well-being and healthy communities. But what can you share with us more specifically about what's going on, what you're dealing with?
Well, one of the reasons I wanted to focus on this particular topic, emotional well-being and healthy communities, is because you really can't have one without the other.
Right.
You can't have emotional well-being if you don't have healthy communities, and you can't have healthy communities without emotional well-being. And so these are topics that are very close to our hearts as women, activists, mothers, and we could go on naming the different identities and roles that we have. But we really have a connection to these themes, and we wanted to really try to spend some time tonight talking about that connection and how one can't exist without the other, and that the work that we do produces emotional well-being and healthy communities. And we want to talk a little bit about our roles. We now have adult children that we're parenting, but we want to reflect back on our roles as parents and maybe try to speculate about what parents are dealing with currently in terms of parenting and what the relationship is to the themes that we're talking about, emotional well-being and healthy communities.
Let me just ask you one quick question. What made you get into this whole field, into emotional well-being and healthy communities to begin with?
Because I was so emotionally unhealthy. I, in terms of working to heal myself, I wanted to really understand what had happened. How did all of this stuff, assaulting me, assailing me, create the person that I had become, and how would I go about healing and changing and rebirthing myself. And so I really had a personal commitment and involvement in terms of the issue.
Okay. All right. You go ahead.
So when we talked a little bit about this, one of the things that Junee was talking about, and I don't want to steal your thunder, but I'm going to kind of start it off in terms of looking at the community level, how we were talking about the family unit is only one aspect of the community and the various systems that are represented in the community. Can you name some of those, and then we'll go back to a focus on the family unit?
Yes, well, when you look at communities, we all know that there are elements that and systems that also sustain it. We know that we have the family and the larger community, but there are also quote-unquote institutions that are vital to that process, and those include our schools, of course, primarily, whatever our spiritual worship may be, those institutions are vital to that. Our political systems, our healthcare systems are all essential, and when those systems are functioning or not functioning, if you will, they lend themselves to also how communities and families function. If a mother is not healthy physically or mentally, then that is going to impact the way in which she parents, the way in which she loves her husband or not, and the same thing with a father. So it's necessary in order to for communities to thrive that we have the external institutions, if you will, operating at an optimal level. as well as those elements that are central to the family and the community, all working in synchronicity, if you will, to build healthy communities, healthy individuals.
Right. One of the things we were talking about earlier are the different configurations or compositions of families. Obviously, an extended family, there's big mama and aunties and all the rest of the mamas and the daddies and the this and the that. And so there's a larger sense of who comprises the family. And then there's the nuclear family where there's the partners, the mom and dad and the children, so on and so forth. But there are, and then there's single parent families. The reason I'm bringing this up is that we have to remember that the family is not this one monolithic entity or unit, but there's diversity within our family units. That diversity has a strength and richness to it, but it also can sometimes require some support that may look a little different because that unit looks different when it's a single parent as opposed to a two-parent household, that kind of thing. And as people of color, we've always had diversity within our family units. I want to back up in terms of our introduction, because I want to say where I'm coming from. I've already said, that I'm a black woman, activist, minister, parent, but I'm living here, and I'm starting my third year here in St. Croix, but I moved here from stateside, so all of my experiences as a parent I'll be drawing from the experiences that I had stateside.
Right.
So I don't want to even pretend to know and be familiar with what is going on in terms of the issues and needs in terms of parenting here.
Well, it's critical for us, and we've had this conversation throughout the week, that we not behave like ugly Americans, like many times we see with many people that do, Europeans, blacks, assuming that you walk into a situation and that you want to overlay your worldview on top of someone else's.
Right,
So
exactly.
we want to make sure that throughout this discussion we exercise cultural humility and realize that we are outsiders in this instance. However, but humanity is universal.
That's
Love
the key.
is universal.
That's the key.
It does have no region to it or whatever. So we can't speak from our humanity. So
Right,
that's our standpoint.
right.
Definitely.
So one of the things that I want to start with is in terms of some parenting reflections, Junee. We were talking about what worked for us in terms of parenting, and I mentioned having strong support systems and networks. Now, I want you to know that I didn't start off with strong support systems and networks. What happened is that not having them made me realize the void that was there. I was not living in the same area that my parents, that my mother and my siblings were, etc. So I didn't really have that support, and it really was it was challenging and difficult because it meant that I was also a single parent at various times. So it meant that I was responsible for everything. So in retrospect, what I realized is once I understood how powerful this position is and how all-consuming it is, I needed to get me a support system. So I looked for sisters, I looked for brothers, I looked for people who had some similar kinds of interests and that I knew would have my back in terms of helping me with my children. And I'm not just, when I'm talking about helping, I'm not talking about, feeding and clothing them. I mean, doing those kinds of practical things. I'm talking about somebody that can tell me what to do when my, son, who was my youngest, is acting out, or what to do when my oldest daughter is ready to, date or whatever, and I think she's too young, so on and so forth. So I needed some wisdom keepers around me. I needed some older people who really had some insight about parenting, so on and so forth. The other thing that in reflecting back is not only did I need a support system, I needed some role models. I needed to see some brothers and sisters that were doing it right, or doing it at least what I felt like Well, it looked, like it was working well. The children seemed healthy and cool and so on and so forth. And the parents were saying, they were managing to get through it with their sanity and everything. I needed those role models. I needed to know who they were, and I needed for them to, kind of school me and tell me,
I want to interject at this point because I don't want to leave this venue without saying it. To all of those parents who are listening under the sound of my voice, speak love to your children.
Hello.
Start the day speaking love to your children, because when they go outside those walls, there are going to be people there who do not love them like you do. There will be somebody giving them negativity. But if they leave home, wherever they're going, and no one has spoken love to them, they don't have the armor. They don't have the spiritual armor that they're going to need to be good students. So many times, and I understand that there are numerous reasons that this happens, because nobody's spoken love to daddy, nobody's spoken love to mommy, so they don't know. But it's something that has to become a practice, part of the daily life. When the children get up in the morning, speak love to them. Sometimes, you say, get up! And that's the introduction.
Yeah.
They
To the
get
day.
to their day.
Yes.
Well, that sets their mindset.
Yeah.
So we have to speak love, not only to our children, but to each
Other.
other.
Exactly.
Speak love to
Ourselves.
ourselves.
Hello.
And because all we have at the end of the day is love.
Yeah, I cannot affirm that enough, Janae. And I think that in instances where we didn't have that, whether as a role model or we didn't get it from our parents, whatever, that we have to recreate ourselves. We have to ask ourselves, what is not working in my life? And then look to see how we can identify resources, individuals that can help us change, whether it's the script that we've unconsciously created in our lives or whatever, or whether it's been our life circumstances or experiences. But we can make those changes. One of the things that I'm utterly amazed about is how little education and training we're given in terms of parenting. When you think about it, when you want a driver's license, you have to, go to a driving school, you have to take a test and this and that, and none of that is really required in terms of parenting. So I really encourage folks, always seek some information, do some research, talk with others, talk with professionals, so on and so forth, because this is really important stuff. I mean, some of the research talks about that a lot of what children are imprinted with happens between birth and 3 years of age, and so you don't have a lot of time to do this, and so you can't be trying to play catch up while it's happening. So again, the kind of preparation and just going into it with the kind of intentionality that, this is something that's important, and what I do with this child is going to make a difference. I mean, you might be raising the next president. You might be raising, an amazing person that's bringing gifts to the world, so on and so forth. And we have to really look at it and think about it like that.
Yeah, if I could ask a quick question. As you said, you just moved here from States 2-3 years ago. I mean, do you see any differences really from, I guess, raising kids in the States and raising kids here? Have you gotten sort of in tune with the culture here and the do's and the don'ts and that kind of stuff?
I'm still, I'm still a student learning. What I can speculate about is because it is such a small place, what I notice is that there is more of a sense of community here. People speak to you on the street. It feels like a small town to me, and I love that about it because I'm yearning that. I'm missing being this little cog in this big world where, it seems like sometimes it feels like the world is rushing past me, and I'm like invisible, I'm lost, that kind of thing. So what I say is that I'm noticing the sense of community here, the sense that people haven't lost the sense of connections to one another, and they're willing to engage with one another. I love that. I haven't really had a lot of experience in terms of engaging with parents and that kind of thing, but I know the implications of that because, see, we're talking about healthy communities, and healthy communities are communities where people are engaged with one another.
Right.
You know who your neighbor is. You talk with your neighbor. Y'all are involved in the lives of the children. I remember growing up, and the elders in the church would ask me at report card time what kind of grades I got and that kind of thing, and they have a little quarter for every A I got and this and that. And these were oftentimes older people who themselves had not received the education, had migrated up from the South, and what they were saying to me was they were conveying to me the value of education, and they recognized that all of the elders were my parents, and they behaved like they were. They wanted to know how you doing, and how you coming in your classes, and what's your goal, what's your intention, and they always encouraged us, get that education and bring it back. You owe it to the community. You have to give back to the community. So they were teaching constantly and planting seeds, so on and so forth.
I would like to, if it's permissible, to ask you all a question.
Sure.
Sure.
Given the technology and the fluidness of culture across the world, that we're so globally linked now, what influences, both positive and negative, has that technological evolution had on an island like Singapore?
Well, when we were growing up, we basically had had cable TV. We didn't have no internet around us, so.
And I think even earlier on, before that, we had antenna. You had your antenna on the side of the house, and you turned it to catch your station.
Right.
So I remember those days.
So I mean, and then too, we had a tight knit community that if you did something wrong, even before you got home, the home knew what was going on. So we always had a straight road to kind of walk and to guide us along that path. Now today, it seems like for us, it's like the technology has just bombarded us so fast. It's like it's taking the young people, the ones who are not strong enough, because that's, again, as you said, Reverend, your home is your base, your home is your foundation, and where you learn everything. Because if the home is not strong, when you come out of that home, you're going to learn what the streets tells you, but when you go back home and you're not going to learn, and the home is not that base or that foundation, you're going to get lost, and you're going to get lost quick. So I appreciated the time that I grew up in. Today, if for me, I see if the kids don't have that spirituality and that foundation in that spiritual, first and foremost, you have to be spiritual before you go anyplace else. They're going to be lost. Because with our technology is at our fingertips, and we could be connected to any and everything.
Yeah, the technology is sort of taken over. It's it's in your hand. Everything, Facebook, Twitter, and it's very distracting from going to school and learning, and it causes problems.
Yes.
People live on Facebook, and so their lives are sort of run through Facebook in a sense, and that's not. I mean, you get some really kind of good information from Facebook in a sense, but there's more to the world than just that.
Right.
And so, my son is almost 30 now, and so when he was coming up, there was BET and that kind of stuff, and I was even back then, no BET for you,
Right.
because I knew that it was a distraction,
Yes.
and so back then, internet was just starting,
Right.
but who would have ever thought that Facebook and Twitter now?
Instagram.
It's too much. It's too much. It's too much distractions
Yes.
for the kids, and then you have other bullying and all this other kind of stuff. It's just too much. It's just too much distraction. So, like Soup said, and I agree. Home foundation is key. I grew up here. I was raised here, and my mom, cracked the whip, and here I am, 50 years old, and look at me. I'm grounded, very humble, but this is 50 years of life for me. So you just got to thread carefully, and hopefully, as parents now, and you're raising young kids, they can see that these kind of things are obstacles, and sort of guide them away from that.
I think it's going back to what we were saying about building building support systems
Networks, yes.
and networks. And not just when you're in flames. See, people do that too. It's like they don't connect to anybody until there's a crisis.
Crisis, yes.
That's not
No.
how you build networks and relationships. You build them when everybody's doing okay.
Yes.
Yes.
And then people don't mind stepping up when you're in crisis.
Crisis.
But anybody's going to feel used if you only show up when you got a crisis.
When there's a crisis,
Definitely.
yes.
And also another thing is about reciprocity. Just you give, you get. You give, you get. That's a universal law, and you cannot beat God's giving. If I can interject that into the equation. So, but sometimes people are holding their hands so tightly, holding on really to
Yes.
crumbs,
Yes.
when the Creator has so much more. If you just open your hands and open your heart and be willing to give a little,
Yes.
He will multiply that
Yes.
tenfold.
And
And-
the thing with that is you have to give first.
Yes.
You have to give first,
Exactly.
and then you'll get. You
Right.
know.
But we also have to teach that to our children.
Yes.
My mom, I was born in Birmingham, Alabama. Shout out to Alabama and Birmingham.
Okay.
The cradle of the civil rights movement.
That's right.
And what I learned, my mom used to always say, charity begins at home,
Home,
and
that's
it
right.
spreads
That's
abroad.
right.
And I used to think, what in the world is she talking about? But then I began to learn that you can't go out into the community and talk about what you're doing and this what and your home is raggedy.
Is in raggedy, yes.
No, that's not how it works.
Yes.
It all starts within your home and how you live, and you walk that walk. And so as an activist, as an educator and a researcher, I know that before I go out trying to engage anybody,
Right.
I have to make sure that my spiritual house is in order, that my mental house is in order, because a lot of people mess up folk, wounded warriors and wounded healers out in the community supposedly helping people, and they're jacked up.
Yes.
So we have to constantly build those of us like Brother Campbell who are out on the front lines in the community. We have to nurture and support and get behind these people as well and say, we got your back. We know this not easy, but we got you.
Right.
And then he can feel lifted up and fortified. So it's important. That's also an integral part of building healthy communities, that those people who are out there that are the healers and the educators, that we show them some love, because we'll run up to that school. I don't know about here, but in the States, baby, they'll run up to that school and be ready to scrap with the teacher in a heartbeat,
Yeah.
which to me is unbelievable. I
Unbelievable.
never, when I was coming up, first of all, you didn't want the teacher really to have to
That's
interact
it.
with your mom. Number one,
Hello.
you just wanted to walk
Yeah,
the
true.
line. That was the
That's
worst
it.
thing.
That's
But
it.
to imagine that you were acting out and your mom come up to the school
That
ready
just-
to fight
And,
this.
and mom is acting out.
It
Yeah.
couldn't even. That wasn't even a thought to begin with.
Yeah.
You understand?
Yeah.
That wasn't even
Yeah.
a thought. You know. So.
But,
Yeah.
but we gotta, those people on the front line, we gotta show them some love, and parents have to get involved in their child's education. They have to understand. I have a son who is a single father, and my grandson is 6 years old. But I tell him, you are his first teacher.
Yes.
You
Yes.
do not depend on that
Yes.
school system
That's right.
to educate him, and especially you do not depend on that school system to educate him about
Us.
who he is
Yes.
Yes.
as a young black boy. You don't. That's reckless
Yes.
endangerment.
Yes.
Because basically it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
It happened.
It's not
Yeah.
going. The master is not going to empower your child
No way.
to be the next Marcus Garvey. It's
That's
not
right.
happening.
Yeah.
So we have to take that primary role.
I want to pick up on that point because Janae and I have been friends for many, many years. We raised our sons together, and our sons are in their 30s now. And one of the things I remember distinctly, I have two other children, females, is that it felt very different raising my son. I always felt this anxiety and this fear that that he was under siege and he was not going to make it. And so I remember when he graduated from high school, he decided he didn't want to go to college. He wanted to go into the Navy. And I'm getting emotional thinking about this because the way they do this is the night before they put you up in a hotel, motel, or whatever,
Yes.
and then early the next morning they take you to the base. I remember literally turning over my son to them that night with this sense of relief. I have made it. My man-child has survived his first 17, 18 years of life. And the reason I'm bringing this up is, as part of my parenting, like, I had to let him know what the reality is out here. You can't wear your pants down around your knees, because those police will see a thug and a gangster, and they will roll up on you in a certain kind of way. You don't need to be creating that kind of energy, because we know it's out there already.
Yes.
And it's detrimental to your survival. And of course, he didn't understand it at the time and wasn't always thrilled about what mom was telling him he needed to do.
Right.
But he didn't go out the house with his pants around his knees. I don't know what he did once he got out there.
Yes.
But
yes.
not only was I telling him what he could do and couldn't do, but I was trying to give him an explanation as to why, so that he could make some choices and hopefully make some good choices. But I mean, anytime a parent has to tell mostly our men children, okay, if you get stopped, put your hands in a visible place. Do not make sudden movements. Do not be your sassy, smart-ass self to this police. Put on your most humble appearance and attitude. I mean, I remember having this conversation with my son. You know, this is only a part of our reality that we have to instill in our children, but again, particularly our boy children. And if this brings home to us the complexity of parenting, I mean, this is just the tip of the iceberg in terms of how we help them navigate life, number one, for survival, but more than survival, so they can thrive and so that they can be an asset to our people and be able to give something back, so on and so forth. But in order to do that, they've got to survive.
Yes. And two, Reverend, two, is the fact that we are Africans living within a European society too. That's also make the whole thing even more difficult upon us. Mm-hmm. You know, so it's like what works for the other nationalities, it's not gonna work for us. And no matter what you try to do, no matter how you try to spin it, until we see it from an African perspective and deal with it from African perspective, then we see the fullness of our work, our growth, our thriving, and everything that we want to accomplish. You know?
Yeah, you can't forget who you are out here.
Definitely
and you
not.
can't forget where you are. One of the things I would like to talk a little bit about, and we have we could talk more about some reflections about parenting, but I want to move to some of the, what I call family dynamics that lead to some troubled outcomes. And so one of the things I want to start with has to do with money. In a household, regardless to whether the partners are married or not, but struggles around money, not having enough of it, or who's going to decide how it's spent, and this and that kind of thing, we can create a whole lot of chaos and havoc and conflict over money. Also, moving to blended families. Now, we've always had blended families. We now have a name for it. I mean, we're black folks. We informally adopt and bring in, brothers and sisters, or we send them out and go live with Big Mama, until something cools out or whatever. But the point is, blended families are more than a notion. And if we aren't intentional in terms of how we address the situations and pay attention to the different personality dynamics and how we can have an effective household, so on and so forth. And the more that we decide that we want to have blended families, for those of you that haven't heard that term, so if I have children of my own and I marry or partner with someone who has children and we come together, we now have a blended family.
Okay.
And so we have to figure out how to do this thing. Otherwise, it just gets chaotic and crazy. And of course, we can do it, but you got to be intentional. You got to really, really be understanding and compassionate, and you got to figure out lines of communication, which brings me to another one of the elements in terms of troubled outcomes: ineffective or poor or just simply no communications. I cannot tell you how many times I've seen conflict in families because people don't know how to communicate, and hollering at one another, or silent treatment, or just punishing people with, acting out behavior or whatever. That is not communication. It's a distortion of communication, but it is not effective communication. And so many of us have poor communications. Also, another family dynamic is substance abuse. We have to begin to speak the truth and tell the truth, okay? Our families have substance abuse and issues, and we cannot act like that elephant in the room isn't there.
Right.
Because it takes its toll on our families. And sometimes this stuff turns into a generational situation where we got alcoholism running 2 and 3 generations in our families because we refuse to address it and deal with it and name it. We refuse to identify those systems in the community that had some resources for us. And then along with the substance abuse piece, let's talk about the violence. Let's talk about the violence that goes on in our house, in our households, and our families, whether it's the domestic violence with the partner abuse, or it can be elder abuse, it can be incest, it can be so many things. Folks, we have to deal with the violence. We have to deal with it because it's destroying us. And it's destroying us from the inside out. We cannot have healthy communities. We cannot have healthy families while there is violence going on. The bullying that sometimes takes place. I overheard a conversation that a friend was sharing with another friend the other day about the grandmother was taking care of her grandchildren, and one of her sons was saying, you are not really treating my children fairly and this and that, and there was a big fallout about this. The point is that they almost came to blows around this whole family dynamic about the grandmother not treating, the children fairly, so on and so forth. But I'm telling you, the issue of violence and the kind of impact that it has on our families is just so detrimental. And then it does not remain within the walls of the household. If we're talking about violence in the community, it didn't emerge out of a vacuum. It came from someplace. And so we can't continue to ignore the family violence, because it eventually becomes community violence when it flows outside of that household out into the community. And I know all of us are greatly concerned about the violence that's taking place in our various communities, and we need to address that. The mental illness is another issue, and that is it's one of the ones that I think we're embarrassed by it, and so we kind of brush it up under the rug and hope that it doesn't exactly,
it goes away.
That no one will bring it up, or we know Sister so and so in the family. She talks to herself, and she occasionally wanders off and this and that. We know she got some issues, but we will not bring in some resources to help her. And we've got to stop being embarrassed. We've got to stop holding these secrets in the family, so on and so forth. And we've got to talk about the mental illness. We've got to, otherwise, the suicides that take place that we don't want to talk about.
Right.
Or the violence that may be occurring, or even the exploitation of the individuals who are mentally ill. One last issue in terms of dynamics that can lead to complications in families is our schisms and bad blood we create. So Uncle Joe across town doesn't communicate with Aunt Helen anymore because they fell out years ago. Nobody can even remember what the fallout was all about. But all we know now is we never go over to Aunt Helen's house anymore.
Yeah.
And Uncle Nelson and the rest of his family, you know we related, but we don't even act like we are family. We got to stop that stuff. You know, in the scheme of things, it really has no meaning, and it works detrimentally against us. And we got to let this stuff go, folks. And
How is the community here, receiving you guys? They receptive, open arms, thank goodness you guys are here to help. I mean, how is the community,
I don't know how to answer that. I'm just little Qiyamah coming over here because I love St. Croix, and I want to be here. And so, I've been spending time trying to settle in and get familiar with St. Croix. I mean, I feel like I've been received well. I haven't really started doing the work that I want to do because I'm still really settling in and getting familiar and so on and so forth. I mean, the work with Brother Campbell that we're doing is some of the first work that I'm starting to do out in the community.
Okay.
Yeah, I have joined a couple of organizations. I'm on the board of the Interfaith Coalition of St. Croix. I'm on the board of, what's the other organization I'm on the board? Thank you. Sexual assault, domestic violence and sexual assault council, and they actually have a faith-based committee that I'm a part of.
This is your DVSAC?
Yes.
Coalition?
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Council of Elders. I just came from a meeting with them. This is a newly developing group of people, all elders who decided, you know what, elderhood is a very important role, and we want to be more intentional about that role, and we want to be able to be available to the community. And so we are really working to really put in place an organization of individuals who take their role of elderhood very seriously and can be able to offer and give back to the community that has nurtured us over the years. So that's one of the other areas that I'm working on. I'm also on the board of Liberty House. So I'm just now beginning to get connected with some of the interests in the areas that I think are
you guys are, this is your first time here? I mean, so you said you came 2-3 years ago. I mean, were you here?
I did.
I've only been here.
Okay, so you're okay. Okay.
Staying.
Yeah.
Okay.
So she's job hunting, and I'm really trying to help her find a job because I want my partner to stay, because we can really do some great things together. Brother
yes.
Campbell can testify to this. We make a great team. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I want to say that we have to realize that we are at war. As people of color, we are at war. It's a spiritual war. It's an economic war. It's a war for our survival. There are forces of genocide operating every day.
Yes.
And we have to be conscious. We have been lulled to sleep by BS, by music, by advertising, by materialism. And I don't know how many people saw that movie years ago, School Days, when Lawrence Fishburne says, "Wake up."
Oh,
yeah.
That's real. That is real. We cannot afford, if we continue to sleep on this, we will be not only left behind, we will be dead.
Yeah. You mentioned that movie. I think some of the younger generations probably don't know that movie. That's a very old movie.
Yeah,
You probably have to pick a modern day movie.
Yeah, but it's still relevant.
Yeah.
The message,
It's still
yes.
very
Yeah.
well. I couldn't really pick a modern day movie
Okay.
that would give
That's
that
right.
kind of message.
Okay.
That really broke down all the isms that Reverend Qiyamah just talked about that exist internally within our own community.
Yeah, okay.
You know, around color, around hair, and all of this other stuff.
Yes.
But understanding we're all in this together. So that's the reason why I know it might sound, but actually it's still relevant.
Yeah.
5 years later, it's
Yeah.
still relevant.
Yeah.
But nobody really is coming, and that's deliberate. You know,
Okay.
our children, and no disrespect to Tyler Perry, but you know, we see that kind of stuff that's harmless. It's not empowering.
Probably
We're not getting
Exactly.
You're not gaining anything
a lot. I mean, a lot of shout out to all the indie filmmakers that are really giving good stuff, but unfortunately, that's not what the average young person has access to.
Exactly.
You know, they're
Yes.
not being directed toward those films that are being made that are conscious raising.
Okay.
They're being directed towards the ones that continue to
Continue
lull
to,
them to sleep.
exactly to
Yes.
degrade them, you know. So
How does this they just had this young man shot in Ferguson, Missouri. How does how do you guys feel about that? Yeah, personally, I think it's real sad.
It is. It's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking because this is such an old story. We were talking about Emmett Till, and maybe some of the younger brothers and sisters don't remember Emmett Till, but to be able to have that kind of
still continue.
continuum and to see it continuing
And
today is really it's
I-
frightening to me.
I know the slap in the face to know that you have an African president in the United States. So it shows me, for the conscious man, that is he there for us or is he there for the organization? Which we know, I mean, that's a whole different story, but it's very sad to see what's going on right now within America. The race issue is alive and well.
It is. It
It's
is.
alive
But
and
what
well.
was very heartening to me was when I read it. They were saying within a short period of time, over 600 people hit the street. I mean, who's able to turn out that kind of numbers so spontaneously? These people didn't need a Al Sharpton. They didn't need a leader. They knew this is unacceptable. We will not tolerate this. And they were speaking their truth by their presence in the street.
And that was really a direct result of the benefit of technology.
There you go.
But and because it would have taken, and your daughter and I had this conversation, it would have taken the 60s civil rights activists a year to mobilize
Those kind of numbers.
Yes.
and those kind of resources.
Yes.
However, the downside of it is that is the flavor of the week. That's
perfect.
the flavor. That's the
Exactly.
flavor of the week.
Exactly.
Because when you bring people together in a cyber struggle, if we remember, Brother Gil Scott Heron said the revolution will not be
Be
televised.
televised.
Well, it won't be on the internet either.
right.
Well,
On the internet either. You know what I'm saying is it's about people on the ground,
Ground-
and there
on
were
the ground.
people on the ground,
You're right.
but they're building relationships with each other that last beyond when the media
Leaves.
yeah.
You-
And
you-
so it's who's there still on the ground, and those are the people that need our love and need our support. The ones that are left behind once all the media trucks.
Trucks
I
gone,
imagine
right.
By now they probably already have.
They're gone. Yes, exactly. So
But I mean, it's the same old story.
exactly.
It's the same old story. But and that's what our children. It's sad, but it's always been that somebody has to be sacrificed
The price.
in order for people to
To
really
really
see. Because we
and
get
wake
into
up.
this thing, like you were saying, we have a black president, so we have arrived. We're colorblind and we're multiracial. All these terms get sung around, and it's we are the world we join. But it takes something like this,
to wake us up.
and if our children are really paying attention, and that's what I hope that they understand, that just because you go to school with them and sit like them and this, that, and they dress like you and they play rap music and all this other stuff, do you understand that a European boy would not have happened? This would not have happened to him, that he was in a store and they said he didn't actually
You
steal
steal
the
the
he didn't
cigar.
steal the cigar,
Yeah.
but he had a confrontation.
Confrontation.
That the boy that killed all those people in that movie theater, I don't remember where it was, some time back, the one that they managed to capture him alive. He's somewhere in a mental institution.
Exactly.
But
And he committed murder.
And he committed not
not
only
one
murder, but mass murder.
Exactly.
Yeah. So
exactly.
these are the things that our children have to
really look
pay
into.
attention,
Yes.
and that they use this wonderful tool that we have of digital world, of social media, and all
Yes.
these other things, and the internet, use them for something other than watching people booty shake. And don't get me wrong, when I could, I shook. But it's always got to be a balance.
Exactly.
And you got to be
Definitely.
conscious of what you're allowing
To come into
your being.
Yes.
right.
Because it really, I hear this music and I'm like, oh my God, I understand. I mean, it's programming and mind control.
Very
at the highest-
systematically. Very systematically.
Exactly.
And to even piggyback on what you're saying, Junee, is that now, a month afterwards, Ferguson, Missouri has gone. But has the problem leave? 21,000 Africans is in this city, with the majority of Caucasian being on your police force. So who is keeping up this fight? Who's keeping up this march? Who's keeping up this drive to let us know that there is a problem and this cannot go on no more? You know, so are they just coming in to just brush us aside? Again, no, it should not be, because one life gone should not even happen. Because even to say what you said, Junee, is that when last have we heard an African officer killed a Caucasian youth? You don't hear it. You don't hear it. Why does it always have to be a Caucasian killing an African youth? Why?
Well, let me just share a story with you from Atlanta.
Okay.
A couple of years ago, a white boy stands on top of this restaurant with a high-powered rifle with a scope on it and shoots a black police officer. It took, well, he was from money. His last name was Maddox, and if anybody remembers Georgia, there was Lester Maddox. So he's probably from that family.
Okay.
It took over 2 years for him to ever come to trial. He got probation. If a black youth, first of all, if a brother had stood on, he couldn't have shot a slingshot
Off of that.
off a roof at a white officer and lived to tell
about it.
Anything about it. That's right.
So we have to stay on top,
Stay on top.
And look and really see what's going
The
on.
dynamics of
Yeah.
what's facing us. That's right.
And that no, these people are mad. You know, yeah, we got this black guy in the president in the White House, and they're pissed off about it. But they can't go shoot him.
No.
So they just say, well,
we
you know
will
what?
just take the
We're
go
gonna
into the inner cities.
No, we're gonna make sure that there are no more Barack Obamas.
Of him comes up.
Yeah.
That's the last one,
Yes.
and we best believe it really is for.
Yeah.
It was it was part of
It
the
was a
agenda.
test.
It was a part of the
yeah,
agenda.
It was a test.
Yeah.
But
So what do you tell young kids? Then when you get into the what do you tell them about what's happening? I mean, how do you steer them to another way, or get them to start thinking another way?
it's hard.
It is.
Because
It is.
voices, when we were growing up, everybody was on pretty much the same
Same
page.
side,
Whether
exactly.
whether it was a person, your teacher, your principal, person down the street. Now we're not even the same book. You know, so it's hard for you to come up, and especially as an elder, because we have created this environment where there is no real respect
Yeah.
for elders.
Yeah.
You know, young people don't trust anybody over 30.
That's why.
You know, and it's like, what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, people even when I was 30, I didn't know anything.
Yeah.
And you don't even trust people that's 30, and so you're listening to dummies, basically.
Basically.
No disrespect.
No
I don't
disrespect,
mean- and I don't
exactly.
mean it-
None
but I mean
whatsoever.
in terms
But it's the
of
reality
life-
of what it is, exactly.
In terms of life experience.
Yeah.
So
What-
And that's the hard thing, you know. A lot of people, you know, ask me, well, "What do you do, David? What do you do?" And I'm like, "Well, it's a very difficult thing. I mean, you know, I don't know. I have any of the answers.
Right.
I mean, I see that there's a very serious problem. I mean, it's very, very serious. But how do we fix it? How do we you know prevent police officers from just shooting little young boys that have their hands up? I mean, there's got to be a better way from a police perspective to deal with that.
I think too, what it have to goes back to back in the 60s, back in the 50s. We got to put our own forces in there too. We got like how the Black Power had it when the police forces was started marching against us. So we have to start empowering our own self and start empowering our own communities. And I think that's when they go. It might not stop fully, but it will put them in check.
right.
They will even think 2-3 times now before they go in there and try to do something stupid as that. You know what I mean? So, and that's part of the process too. You know.
Yeah,
There were
it's difficult.
community. They used to have community policing.
That's
Yes.
that's
There
what
were
I was going to
community
talk about.
boards
Yes.
Yeah.
That monitored this kind
Right.
of stuff. That you didn't get an officer that had 15 complaints about excessive use of
And
force.
still on payroll.
Yeah.
And still on payroll.
Yeah.
You know.
I was telling Janae that in the community where I was living in Atlanta, they had community policing. And so they took the police out of the squad cars and put them walking the beats
beat.
the
That's
way
right.
they used to do.
That's right.
So we got a chance to meet them, know their names. They got a chance to meet us. So they really, it was more of a, we were creating this community with these teams, and we were about the same thing. It wasn't about them coming in and brutalizing us and acting like somehow or another we are like all outlaws and criminals and this and that. But we're on the same team. We're about creating healthy and safe communities, so on and so forth. You know, so I just was in a, what are these called? Neighborhood watch meeting the other day. And I was listening because the police commissioner or somebody was there, and they really aren't trying to create a different image. Somebody raised the question about the dark tinted windows, and he explained that that's because of the equipment they have, and you know, so on and so forth. But the reality is, I spoke to one the other day, and I couldn't even tell whether they spoke back or not because the dark tinted glass and stuff is.
Yeah, you're talking about in the cruisers that
exactly,
they have? Yeah.
exactly.
Okay.
You know, so like, what's the possibility
Bring
of
down the
even
barriers.
having a
Bring down those
relationship
barriers.
with
Yeah.
this person that's supposed to be policing my neighborhood? You know.
Yeah, you can't see them, but they can see out.
Uh,
Very clearly.
Yeah.
Yeah, very clearly.
But they've turned our communities into war zones. You know, sometimes
They created.
you're like,
They created,
is this
Junee.
Bosnia or
Yeah.
what?
But we also have to take some responsibility.
Well, we
for that.
accepted it too,
The
exactly.
war zone has to do with the level of violence,
Violence
that is taking place,
yes.
and we've got to figure out really how to check this disconnect. I really believe that the individuals that are committing the acts of violence and that kind of thing, they are so disconnected from their humanity. They have forgotten that they are human beings, and the individuals that they're engaging in violence with, there is no sense in their mind that this is another human being.
Yes.
That's the level of insanity
Sanity.
that is taking place. And we cannot allow our people to continue to be brutalized to the point where, I mean, they're losing their conception that they're even a human being. I mean, it's on one level, to me, it's really frightening, because we're talking like, what's his name? Frantz Fanon talks about psychological warfare and
yes,
mental disorders. We're seeing the resulting mental disorders that happens to people when they're constantly oppressed. And one of the things Frantz Fanon talks about, he says the colonized people, oppressed people, act out the violence that they really want to act out on the oppressor. They act it out on themselves. And if we are not seeing that, I don't know what this is.
Right.
You know.
I heard mothers now today tell me that their sons have been telling them 18, 19 years old, they're ready to die. Imagine a mother could come to tell an individual, this son is telling her that he's ready to die. So he's accepted whatever society has put out there to him, and whatever goes,
But
goes.
Right. And he hasn't even lived.
But what is he dying for?
Exactly.
That's the whole thing.
Yeah.
What are you gonna die for?
Yeah.
A piece of trinket,
Right.
basically.
Right.
Basically.
So you just because in the street, you know, but it's been glamorized.
Yeah.
That's the whole
Yeah,
thing,
They
Junee.
the
become-
thug life.
Yes.
Thug life. And
Yeah.
it's like you have so much to live for because there are people who laid down their life for you for real.
Before, exactly, for you to
but-
come now today.
Right. Right.
Mm.
But you got to push forward because what you're laying down for
Is
is
nothing.
nothing. Because you can't
Nothing.
afford a new pair of sneakers.
Sneakers.
You want to die? You know? No.
You're walking around with millionaires, and none of them is thinking how to become a millionaire
Right.
himself.
Right.
You know? So,
It's about 9:14. We're gonna try and go maybe another 4 or 5 minutes. So anything that you guys want to like hit on specifically here, maybe some like your telephone numbers, your websites, your social media kind of stuff, so the people that want to reach out to you have a way to do that.
Well, I want to mention a thought that I have here. We talked about the Council of Elders and the important role of elders. What I didn't say is that the elders are the culture bearers. If we don't know who we are, then it's really, really difficult to really try to get a handle on
Yes.
well, who am I in the world, and how do I show up, and how do I, claim my identity, my gifts, so on and so forth. So this whole thing about culture bearers and cultural institutions is so important. I can't emphasize that enough. We have to have individuals who can speak the truth to our young people. How do they hear it? How do they receive it? Well, I don't know all of the answers, but I was at a police athletic league function the other day with Rookie. I really respect the work that he and other brothers and sisters are doing, because they're saying, I'm not giving up. There are brothers and sisters out here that want better for themselves, and I'm going to see that they get that by being a culture bearer, by being out here with them, giving them my time and my talents, making a space for them so that they can survive this craziness and insanity. And the more of that we do, and the more we realize we are the culture bearers. We are those individuals who will plant the seeds and remind our children and our children's children of who they are. I remember one night my daughter, she was in her first year of law school, and she called me in the middle of the night. It's like, Mom, all these other students are smarter than I am. They have more resources. Da. I had to read her the riot act. I had to remind her who you are and whose you are.
Yes.
We have to do that with our children. They forget sometimes, and we have to constantly remind them, honey, you are a child of the Most High. People love you, and you are here with talents and gifts. She is a gifted and beautiful lawyer now. She's into international human rights and this and that and so on and so forth. But this same young woman that night, who was feeling like everybody else is smarter than me, and I can't do this and that and all that kind of stuff. But that's the kind of, we have to be there for our children and for young people in that kind of way.
Right.
Anything you want to close with?
It's all love.
It's all love. It's simply put, right? Simply put.
I just want to say how happy I am to be in St. Croix. This is probably the best decision I ever made in my whole life. Was to come to St. Croix.
Did you know somebody here, Qiyamah?
I didn't. I came as a visiting minister for a month back in February 2012, and in the second week I was here, I knew I was supposed to live here and work here. Okay. And I told them, I said, I will be back. And I was. 6 months later, I was back.
All right, all right.
That's quick planning, eh?
Yes.
All right, so tonight our guests are Qiyamah Rahman and Junee Hunt. They were talking about emotional well-being and healthy community. I know you guys can go much longer, and we want you guys to come back and do like a part 2 and a part 3, because this is kind of a conversation we have to have all the time.
Yeah,
because people have to hear it all the time for it to sink in, and
Right.
then eventually it will start making sense to them.
Yeah.
So we'll definitely have you back sooner than you think,
Thank
but soon, real soon. But you never mentioned anything about your phone number or anything like that. You guys have a phone number or website or Facebook page that people can reach out to you and share some stuff? Not right now. Okay.
All right.
But we're working on it.
Okay.
Fair enough.
Okay.
All
So
right.
if you're
If
out
you
there,
want to reach them, you could call It's Your Perspective, and we'll contact
yes,
you.
yeah. Just give
Thank
us say,
you.
just reach out to us. We have email, we have the website, we have Facebook pages. Reach out, and we'll pass on
We'll make
the
a
questions, comments to our guest tonight.
Right.
Once again, I want to thank you guys for coming out.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank
And
you for
really
having
appreciate
us.
the time.
Yes.
And you guys will be back before you know it.
Okay.
All right. Good night, and thank you.
Good night.
All right. It's Your Perspective Talk Show. We're here Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. You can reach us at 340-201-9005. We'll be right back.
We'll be right back. Stand by.